a prominent Ontario, well, Canadian ad agency, Vickers and Benson, that was doing pro bono work for a lot of charities and environmental groups. So I decided I'd talk to their creative director and find out what the story was. And then I started seeing Vickers and Benson's name everywhere I seemed to be looking as a historian. So over the years, I followed up and interviewed more members of Vickers and Benson about a number of topics. And well, one of those topics was the Summit series. There we go. So, founded in 1924, by the year 1972, Vickers and Benson was Canada's largest advertising agency. It had offices in Toronto and Montreal, and it had a very impressive client roster, including the Ford Motor Company of Canada, the Bank of Montreal, Canadian Tourism Commission, British Airways, Gulf Canada Loblaws, etc., etc. As I said, really impressive roster. Their creative director at Vickers and Benson was Terry OMalley. For those of you who might have watched Mad Men, Don Draper, the main character, his position was creative director. So same role here, just slightly better behavior on Terry OMalley's part. Now, Terry was a local hockey star growing up in St. Catharines, Ontario, and he ended up in the late 1950s playing for the Harvard Crimson. And he was twice named an All-Ivy defensive forward. Now, of course, I'll throw in here, this Terry OMalley should not be confused with the three-time Canadian Olympian Terry OMalley from Toronto. Same name, different character, but they were both really good at hockey. Terry OMalley played on a powerhouse Crimson squad. They made it to the Final Four twice, and actually, in one of those occasions, faced off against our very own Brian McFarland's team. And at the end of the game, Brian and Terry swapped their jerseys. And when Terry went back to Harvard, they made him pay for it. Pay for it as in he had to pay for his old sweater that he gave to Brian McFarland. This team in Harvard was coached by Hockey Hall of Famer Cooney Weiland, and it included Bob Owen, Robert McVeigh, Bob Cleary, and his brother Bill Cleary, who had turned down a contract offer from the Montreal Canadiens in order to pursue a more lucrative career in insurance. These collegiate players that I just mentioned, they were key figures on the United States team that won gold at the 1960 Winter Olympics in Squaw Valley, California. Now you can say, what is the connection between Vickers and Benson and the Summit series? Well, it was Alan Eagleson. I spoke to Alan when I was doing research on this, and as he told me, when I was given the opportunity or the challenge of putting this thing together, I naturally went to people I could trust and rely on. I went to them because they were friends, but also because they were the best. The first task for Vickers and Benson was coming up with a name for the team. Now, typically Canada's representatives in the international play were known by, well, Canada's national hockey team or some variation of that name. But for an event as big as the Summit Series, that wasn't considered catchy enough. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. So Terry OMalley assigned the task of coming up with a name to a copywriter named Terry Hill. Hill had grown up in Detroit, and he came up with a few ideas. According to Hill, and that's him on the left in that picture, he said, what about the dream team? As he rationalized, this is what we've been hoping for all these years, the NHL players against the Russian nationals. Now, Terry OMalley shot the idea of the dream team down. He said it was too braggadocious. Of course, that wasn't an issue back in 1992 when the United States Olympic basketball team chock full of NBAers decide to run with the Dream Team as their name. Now, Terry's rationale was he had seen Soviet players in action, and having seen his former Crimson teammates that I mentioned earlier, having seen them play on the international stage against the Soviets, he realized that they were probably going to be a really good team. He didn't want to dismiss their chances going against the NHLers. As Phil recalls, he, Terry OMalley, said, "I've seen them play and they are very good. It's going to look bad after the first period of game one if we happen to be down 3-1. So the Dream Team got thrown out the window. But one of Terry Hill's other suggestions was on the mark. As he told me, at the time, there was a racing team called Team McLaren. I thought, that's kind of interesting where you put the adjective in front of the noun. And of course, this ends up how we get the name Team Canada that went into play. The origin of the jersey was an entirely different matter. You could say it was a case of fast fashion. On July 11th, 1972, word was passed on to Terry OMalley that there would be a press conference the following day, and it was the Soviet officials' expectation that Team Canada would unveil their home and away jerseys at the event. Of course, at that point, they didn't have anything. So OMalley assigned this task to John Lloyd. Lloyd was the art director at Vickers and Benson. He was from England, and he didn't particularly care for hockey. But, we won't hold that against him. Lloyd was noted for his minimalist style. What he crafted on short notice was the now famous masterpiece featuring the clean, crisp lines of the maple leaf and the base colors of red and white. According to office lore, he picked up 2 jerseys, one red and one white, from a nearby department store, cut them up, and his wife stitched together the prototypes. Now, one of the notable features of the Team Canada jerseys is that they don't bear the name of the team on the front. And this was intentional. While it was contrary to the IIHF regulations, Team Canada officials successfully argued that it would ruin the design if they added Canada to the front, which is why Canada ended up appearing on the nameplate on the back of the jerseys. There were other contributions. Terry Bush came up with the Team Canada song. I don't know how widely this was used, but to quote the Toronto Star coverage of as Team Canada came together, the beat is folk rock and the words are, I'm not going to sing this. You'll thank me later. There's a big game coming for the world to see, between the best there are, to see who the best will be. Hey Canada, go and get 'em. Team Canada, do it to 'em. Hey Canada, play. Team Canada, we're with you all the way. Now, Terry Bush gained greater acclaim later on in his career for one of his creations, the theme song to The Littlest Hobo, which, that's a darn good song. I found out that it's actually, in present day, very popular over in England because the pubs will play it at the end of the night when it's closing time. They will play the Maybe Tomorrow I'll Wanna Settle Down, Until Tomorrow I'll Just Keep Moving On, that theme song. It gets played in English pubs. There's some other contributions that moved beyond, basic branding. In fact, much of the Summit Series financial success in Canada could be attributed to the work of Vickers and Benson. Media director Ron Bremner told me about advising Alan Eagleson on the advantages of retaining rights to the series. Rather than selling rights to broadcast the games, they opted to pay for production capabilities from the CBC and CTV, meaning the networks would air the games while maintaining commercial selling rights for the partnership of Bobby Orr Enterprises and Harold Ballard, which bought the rights off of Hockey Canada for $750,000. Ron Bremner was also responsible for establishing the rate card for the series, setting the cost for the advertisements, based off of factors including the time of telecasts and the anticipated audience size. The ensuing rate for commercials proved to be unprecedentedly high, which came with its own risk. Given the popular expectation that Team Canada would probably steamroll the opposition, there was a fear among potential sponsors that the audience for the Summit Series would quickly tune out of a one-sided series. As Bremner told me, I remember Terry OMalley and I went to see Ford, one of our clients, because we wanted them to participate in the series to be a major sponsor. We're out there pitching it to Bill Hawkins, who is the Senior Vice President and Director of Marketing for Ford Canada. And he said, if we go for this and everything pans out the way you say it will, that'll be great. But if it doesn't, you'll lose our business, right? So you can see there's a bit of pressure here. And in this sense, I'm sure the folks at Vickers and Benson, while patriotic Canadians, must have appreciated the close-fought nature of the 1972 Summit Series because it was very good for business. So that's my presentation on Vickers and Benson's contributions to the Summit Series. That said, given my fellow panelists focus on the World Hockey Association, I figured it'd be fun to point out where the WHA and Vickers and Benson's connect. In 1973, when John Bassett Jr. acquired the team that would become the Toronto Toros, Terry OMalley and Bill Bremner, co-owners of Vickers and Benson, they joined him as minority owners of the Toros. Because of this, Vickers and Benson took on the task of branding the team. The logo and the jersey design were among their contributions to that team. On top of that, some of the staff that worked on the promotional side of Toronto Toros, they migrated from Vickers and Benson to being WHA Toros employees, and at least one of them followed the team when it moved on to Birmingham afterwards. Anyhow, that's the presentation. I just want to take a moment to thank the organizers. Thank you for including me. Fellow presenters, thanks. Great presentation so far. Those of you watching, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ryan. I'll get you to take there. There we are. Good stuff. Any questions? Or I have one question right off. Ryan, is I understand that the Team Canada sweater is the most expensive one for collectors. Do you have any insights in that one?
Yeah. I don't have an official price that it went for, but, and someone can correct me in the chat here, but my understanding is, was it the Paul Henderson jersey? It went for 6 figures. I feel like I came across that recently.
That's what I read someplace. The Paul Henderson jersey is one of the most expensive ones. Maybe some of the collectors in our group could provide some input into that. So we've had some interesting comments on the series. No doubt that probably many in the audience remembered where they were during the last game of that one. That's kind of a Canadian type thing. You remember where you were, where you saw that last game. Some young members are going to remember that they were still at school.
I wasn't born yet.
Well, you're going to have a tough time remembering it then.
Yeah, but that's one of those moments, right? In the United States, you've heard people, well, they could sit down and tell you where they were when JFK was